I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to find himself staring down the barrel of betrayal. But there I was, staring at my phone, with a message that would rip everything apart. A few simple words that confirmed what I'd been trying so damn hard to deny. My wife, my partner, the woman I trusted more than anyone, was sneaking around with someone else. It hit me like a sucker punch. Every memory, every smile, every little inside joke we had now felt like a cruel joke. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Everything I believed in felt like it was crumbling right in front of me. I kept asking myself, how long has this been going on? And how could she do this to me? In the days that followed, I tried to keep my cool. The part of me that wanted to confront her, demand answers, was burning up inside, but something in me held back. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was fear. I don't know. All I knew was that I needed to get a handle on this before I lost control. So I waited, watched, gathered every little piece of evidence I could find, bracing myself for the moment I'd have to face her. But then came a twist I wasn't ready for. Out of nowhere, he showed up. The man who had been sneaking around with my wife. I don't know how he found me, but there he was. And instead of hiding or feeling any bit of shame, he had the guts to walk right up to me. He looked me dead in the eyes with this smug look, like he thought he'd won some kind of game. And here's the part that really threw me. He started throwing out threats. As if he was the one with power. As if I was supposed to be scared of him. Little did he know, I had something that would turn his world upside down. But I kept my face steady, didn't give him a single hint of what I had up my sleeve. You know, looking back, it's hard to believe that I'm the one telling a story like this. I always thought my wife and I had something real, something strong. We weren't just married, we were partners. We'd been together for over 10 years, built a life together, shared everything. We had our ups and downs, but we always came through. At least, that's what I thought. But now I can see how much I missed. Little things that should have been clues were right there, but I brushed them off. It started with small stuff. She'd miss a call here, come home late from work there. I didn't think much of it at first because, well, everyone gets busy, right? Especially with her job. I tried to be the understanding husband, the one who didn't pry or ask too many questions. But then, things started to change. I remember one night when she got home late. She looked different. Tired, sure, but also distant, almost like there was something on her mind that she didn't want to share. I asked her if she was okay, if something was bothering her. She gave me this tired smile and said it was just works, and I believed her. Why wouldn't I? But now I realize that look, that distance, it wasn't just work stuff. As the days went on, she started acting strange. I'd catch her on her phone, typing like she was in a hurry, then quickly putting it away when she saw me. If I walked into the room, she'd glance up, give me this quick, fake smile, and then go back to whatever she was doing, acting like everything was fine. And every time, a little voice in my head would say, something isn't right here. But I'd shake it off, tell myself not to be paranoid. I trusted her, or at least I wanted to. Then one day, I was sorting through some bills, and I found a credit card statement with charges that didn't make sense. Fancy dinners, hotel stays in towns she'd never mentioned, things that just didn't add up. My stomach dropped. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe these were work expenses, or maybe there was a mix-up with the credit card. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but that knot in my stomach wouldn't go away. Things got worse. She started taking business trips she'd never taken before, and when she'd go, I'd barely hear from her. This was the same woman who used to call and text me all day, but now it was like she didn't have time, like checking in was a chore. When she did message me, it was always short, like she was rushing to get back to something or someone else. Each message felt colder, more distant, but I still tried to push down my doubts. I told myself I was overthinking, letting my imagination get the best of me. After all, we'd been together for so long, it felt impossible that she'd betray me like this. But then one night, while she was asleep, my mind wouldn't stop racing. All those strange moments, the business trips, the hidden messages, it was too much to ignore. So I took a deep breath, picked up her phone, and decided to look. And that's when I found it, the message that confirmed my worst fear. Right there, clear as day, were words from him. The way he spoke to her, the things he said, there was no way to pretend this was just a misunderstanding. In that moment, everything came crashing down. All the trust I'd given her, all the memories we'd made, it felt like it had been a lie. My heart was pounding, and my hands were shaking, but I couldn't look away. Every line I read felt like a stab to the heart. I wanted to wake her up, to scream, to demand an explanation. But I just sat there, frozen, unable to believe what was right in front of me. Now, I wish I could say I took some kind of action right then, that I confronted her, or that I made a big scene. But I didn't. Instead, I put her phone down, lay there in the dark and stared at the ceiling, wondering where it had all gone wrong. I spent the rest of the night trying to piece it all together, how long this had been going on, what I'd missed, and how I'd let myself believe everything was fine. The next morning, I got up, acted like nothing was wrong, and went through the motions. But inside, I was breaking. And all the while, she had no idea that her secret wasn't a secret anymore. After that night, everything was different. It was like I'd crossed some line I couldn't go back from. Knowing what I knew now, seeing those messages, I couldn't look at her the same way. I'd catch myself staring at her, trying to make sense of it all, wondering if I'd just imagined those years of love, or if she'd been pretending all along. Every moment with her felt loaded, every look and touch, like it was hiding something darker. I started noticing all the little things. It was strange how much I'd missed or brushed aside before, things that felt so clear now. She'd leave her phone face down on the table whenever I was around. I'd hear her talking softly on the phone in the other room, and the second I walked in, she'd fall silent or make up some excuse to leave. She was tired a lot more often, or too busy to go out with me, always finding reasons to be somewhere else. And then the real blow hit. One night, she said she had to work late. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice, but that knot in my gut had been growing, and something just felt off. After she left, I stayed up, restless. She was barely texting, her replies short, rushed. So finally, after hours of waiting, I called her. The phone rang, but she didn't pick up. It went to voicemail, and my mind started racing. I tried again, still nothing. And that's when it hit me. She'd always called me when she was late, checked in, kept me updated. But now it was just radio silence. I felt myself getting angry, frustrated that I was here, alone, while she was out somewhere, probably with him. I waited up for hours, refusing to let myself sleep. When she finally walked in, I could barely keep my emotions in check. She looked tired, her hair a mess, and when I asked her how work was, she gave me this quick, tired smile and said, "Same old, same old." I couldn't believe her calm. She looked me right in the eyes, like she hadn't just spent hours lying to my face. I wanted to confront her, to demand she come clean right then, but something stopped me. I didn't want her to know I was on to her. Not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd go, to find out just how many lies she'd spin before she broke. The next day, I could barely focus at work. The thought of her with him, sneaking around, laughing behind my back, ate at me. I kept seeing her face, that calm, smooth look she gave me as she came in the door last night. It felt like I was living with a stranger, someone I couldn't trust, someone I didn't even recognize anymore. Then, later that week, I found something that shattered the last bit of patience I had. She'd left her phone charging on the counter while she was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't have even touched it, but I remembered all those times I'd seen her laughing at messages or whispering into the phone when she thought I wasn't around. So I picked it up and looked. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There, in her messages, was his name. And this wasn't some casual conversation. I was looking at text after text, hidden behind a simple name in her contacts. And it was all right there. Him talking to her like I didn't exist, like he was the only one in her life. Messages about their plans, the things they'd done together, memories they shared, things she'd never even mentioned to me. But the message that finally did it? It was from him, just hours before. "I miss you. Can't wait for tonight." That was all I needed to see. I felt something inside me break. I could hardly breathe. My heart pounded as I held the phone, my hands shaking, staring at that line like it was some kind of joke. Here I was, playing the faithful husband while she was off creating a whole separate life with him. But I didn't lose control. I couldn't let her know I'd found out, not yet. I put her phone down, placed it exactly as it was, and waited. I heard the shower turn off, heard her footsteps coming down the hall, and I sat there, pretending nothing was wrong. When she walked in, she barely looked at me, just gave me a quick nod before grabbing her phone and leaving the room. Over the next few days, I tried my best to act normal. Every time she made up another excuse, I bit my tongue. I could tell she was getting more comfortable with her lies. She'd say she had plans with friends, then barely check in. She'd leave for business trips I'd never heard about before, and I'd act like I believed every word. But I didn't miss a thing. I'd check her phone whenever I got the chance, found receipts she never mentioned, found messages that confirmed what I'd feared all along. Each lie, each excuse felt like a slap to the face, and I knew I had to confront her. But not yet. I needed to be sure. I wanted to see just how much of a fool she thought I was. Then, it happened. One night, she told me she was going out with a friend, said she'd be back late. She smiled, gave me a quick kiss, and just walked out. That was when I decided enough was enough. This wasn't about patience or waiting anymore. This was about respect. I wasn't going to sit around, letting her lie to my face, pretending we still had something real. The next time I saw her, she'd know that her secrets weren't so secret anymore. So I waited, alone, replaying everything in my mind. All the times I'd trusted her, all the moments I'd ignored my gut feeling, every single lie. It was like watching the life I thought I had with her unravel bit by bit. And I promised myself that the next time she walked through that door, it wouldn't be the same. She wouldn't see the quiet, trusting husband she thought I was. No, she'd finally see the truth. Because as much as she thought she was in control, she had no idea what was coming. I told myself I'd wait until the time was right. I'd gather all the proof, confront her when she couldn't talk her way out of it, let her know that her web of lies had finally collapsed. But fate had other plans. One evening, just as I was finishing up work, I got a text. It was from an unknown number, and at first I thought it was spam. But then I opened it. I know you know. That's all it said. My mind raced. How did he, whoever this was, know what I knew? For a second I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't her style. It was too direct, too out in the open. My gut told. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from that same unknown number. I hesitated, but a mix of anger and curiosity got the best of me. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end, and then I heard his voice, a smug, calm tone that only made my blood boil. "So, I take it you've figured it out," he said, like he was talking about the weather, as if this was just another casual conversation. I felt my jaw clench. I didn't respond right away. I wanted him to feel the weight of my silence, to know I wasn't just some fool he could taunt. But he kept going, talking like he had the upper hand. He said he knew I'd been snooping around, that I'd seen the messages, that I'd caught on to their little secret. And then he had the audacity to laugh, like this was all some kind of joke. "Listen," he said, his tone turning cold, "I think it's best if you back off. Don't make things harder on yourself." My mind raced. He was threatening me, trying to put me in my place. I couldn't believe the arrogance, the sheer disrespect. But I kept my voice calm. I wasn't about to let him see that he was getting to me. "Is that so?" I replied, keeping it short, making him wonder what I was thinking. He went quiet, probably expecting more of a reaction, but I wasn't giving him that satisfaction. "I'm just saying," he continued, "your life will be a lot easier if you stay out of our business. She's not yours anymore." That last line hit like a punch to the gut. I felt the anger rise, but I swallowed it down. This guy thought he had me figured out, thought he could bully me into backing off. But he didn't know what I knew. He didn't know the cards I was holding. So I just stayed silent, waiting, letting him dig himself deeper. He kept talking, his tone shifting from smug to downright condescending. He told me that I was pathetic, that I'd been blind to the truth for so long that it was laughable. He mocked me, saying that while I was off working so hard, he'd been there, filling the gaps I'd apparently left. He said things I wouldn't repeat, things that crossed every line of respect. He was testing me, pushing every button he could, waiting for me to snap. But I didn't give him the reaction he wanted. The silence stretched on, and finally, he spoke again, his voice a bit more hesitant this time. "So are you going to back off, or are we going to have a problem?" Now, I knew he expected me to be scared, to stammer out an apology, to back down and disappear. But instead, I just smiled to myself, keeping my voice steady. "You've got some nerve talking to me like this," I said. "But you clearly don't know who you're dealing with." He laughed, clearly unfazed. "Oh, I think I know exactly who I'm dealing with. You're just a guy who's too weak to keep his own wife interested. Face it, she's moved on." It took every ounce of restraint to hold back the words I wanted to throw at him. But instead, I chose a different path. I took a deep breath, and with a steady tone I told him, "If you think you've won anything here, you're fooling yourself. You're just a temporary thrill, a quick fix, and trust me, she'll get bored of you too." There was silence on the other end, but I wasn't finished. I told him that he was nothing but a distraction, a mistake she'd eventually regret. And then I dropped the truth, the piece of information he had no idea I knew. You know, I wonder how your family would feel if they knew what you've been up to, I said, letting the words sink in. The silence that followed was different this time. I could almost feel his arrogance fading, replaced by uncertainty. He stumbled over his words, trying to regain control. What are you talking about? I didn't give him any details, just enough to let him know I wasn't bluffing. I mentioned a few names, hinted at places he'd been seen with her, things he thought were private, things that could make his life a whole lot harder if they came out. And as I kept talking, his tone shifted from cocky to defensive. Suddenly, he wasn't the one in control anymore. Look, let's just keep this between us, he finally said, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. It was the exact opposite of the tone he'd started with, and I could practically see the panic in his eyes, even through the phone. I took my time, letting him squirm, making him feel every second of his own fear. Finally, I told him, you thought you could walk all over me, treat me like some fool. But here's the truth. You're the one who should be worried. He tried to backpedal, saying it was just a misunderstanding, that he didn't mean to cause trouble, but I cut him off. Don't ever contact me again, and if you think about trying to threaten me, remember, I've got a lot more to lose than you do. The line went silent, and I knew he understood. He'd underestimated me, assumed I was weak, assumed I'd just roll over and accept it. But he was wrong, and as I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm. This man who had tried to ruin my life, to take away everything I cared about, had finally realized that I wasn't someone he could push around. But this wasn't the end. I still had to face her, still had to look her in the eyes and make her feel the weight of every lie she'd told. The affair partner may have backed down, but my wife had her own reckoning coming. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. After that phone call, something in me shifted. I'd finally put that guy in his place, made him understand that I wasn't some helpless fool he could push around. But my anger, my disappointment, it wasn't just for him, it was for her. The woman I'd shared my life with, the woman who'd lied to my face every single day. I wasn't just going to let this slide. She needed to know that I knew, and she needed to feel every ounce of betrayal I'd been carrying. So I waited for the right moment, kept things calm on the surface. If she was going to pretend, then fine. I could pretend too. But not for long. That night, she came home late, again. Her hair was slightly tousled, her makeup smudged, and she barely looked me in the eye as she walked in. I knew exactly where she'd been, exactly who she'd been with. But I didn't let on right away. I watched her as she moved around, her words short, her gaze always shifting. She didn't know that I was aware of everything, every single lie she'd been living. Finally, I couldn't hold back. I looked her dead in the eyes, and without even a hint of softness, I said, "Tell me the truth. Just once." She froze, a flash of panic in her eyes. For a moment, she tried to keep up the act, tried to give me her usual dismissive smile. But I didn't break eye contact, didn't give her any way out. She looked away, stammering, trying to come up with some excuse, but I just repeated myself, slower this time. "Tell me the truth." The silence between us stretched, thick and heavy. I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out what I knew and how much she could hide. But there was no hiding this time. I'd waited too long for her to slip up, and I wasn't about to let her talk her way out of this. So I laid it all out. I told her about the messages, the calls, every bit of evidence I'd found. With every word, I watched her face change. Watched the color drain from her cheeks as she realized just how deep in this mess she was. She tried to deny it, of course, tried to come up with some half-hearted excuse. But I didn't let her. I threw every piece of proof right back at her, left her with no room to wriggle out, and then I told her about the call with her affair partner, how he'd tried to threaten me. I told her how he'd had the nerve to mock me, to throw her betrayal in my face like it was some kind of victory. I told her every disgusting word he'd said, and I watched as her expression shifted from shock to guilt, to a kind of sadness I hadn't seen in her eyes before. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not one bit. If anything, her silence, her guilt, only made me feel stronger. She couldn't hide from the truth anymore, couldn't pretend that what she'd done was anything less than a complete betrayal. I wanted her to feel the weight of it, to understand that every single lie she'd told had led her here. She tried to apologize, stammering out excuses, saying it was a mistake, or that she didn't mean for it to go this far. But her words sounded hollow, empty. They meant nothing to me. She'd made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. "You lied to me," I said, my voice cold, flat. "Every day you lied to my face, and you let him mock me, let him think I was too stupid to see what was going on." She didn't have a response. Her shoulders slumped, and she looked down, unable to meet my eyes. She knew I was right. She knew there was no excuse that would make this okay. For a moment, the anger faded, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. This was the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd built a life with. And now, all of it felt like it had been a lie. I thought about all the memories we'd shared, all the plans we'd made, and how none of it meant anything anymore. The weight of it settled on my chest, heavy and painful. But I couldn't let myself dwell on that sadness. She didn't deserve that kind of feeling from me. Not anymore. So I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and told her exactly how things were going to go from now on. "You can't undo what you've done," I said, my voice steady. "But you need to understand something. I'm not going to just walk away and pretend this never happened. You don't get to just erase this." I watched her face as I spoke, saw the shock and regret etched into every line. She looked like she wanted to say something, like she wanted to beg for forgiveness, but I didn't give her the chance. I was done listening to her lies, done letting her manipulate me with fake apologies. "You betrayed me," I continued, feeling the weight of each word. "And you let him think he had some kind of power over me. But here's the truth. You're both nothing to me now. Whatever you thought we had, it's gone." For a moment she looked like she might cry. But I didn't care. I couldn't care. She'd made her choices, and now she was facing the fallout. I got up, walked out of the room, and left her sitting there, alone with the mess she'd created. I didn't look back, didn't say another word. I'd said everything I needed to, and there was nothing left for me to hold on to. The days that followed were quiet. I was alone, but it was different now. I wasn't haunted by doubts or fears. I knew the truth, and that truth set me free. The love I thought I had, the life I thought we'd built, it was gone. But somehow that gave me peace. I didn't need her lies, her excuses. I didn't need anything from her anymore. It's strange. I thought losing her would be the worst thing to happen to me, but in a way, it was the best. Because it made me realize that the only person I could rely on was myself. And as painful as that lesson was, it made me stronger. It showed me that I didn't need someone who could betray me so easily, someone who could lie without a second thought. Now, I know that I deserve better. I deserve honesty, loyalty, respect, and I'll never settle for less than that again. After that night, everything felt different. It was as if a heavy fog had settled over my life, blurring every familiar detail and leaving everything in this muted, painful clarity. I thought that finally confronting her, laying it all out there, would somehow bring closure, maybe even peace. But instead, I was left with a quiet emptiness. I knew the truth, but the truth felt like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. In those first few days, I went through the motions. I'd wake up, go through my usual routine, but every little thing reminded me of her. I'd make coffee, and the memory of her doing the same, smiling and laughing, would hit me like a punch to the gut. Our home, our shared space, felt like it was haunted, every room filled with echoes of her laugh, her touch, her lies. I kept telling myself that this feeling would pass, that eventually I'd learn to live with it. But it felt impossible. The hardest part was the silence. After all the arguments, the realizations, and finally telling her how deeply she'd betrayed me, there was a strange calm, but it was a kind of calm that felt empty. She'd moved out, leaving behind only the bare essentials, and with her gone, the silence grew louder. It was just me, alone with my thoughts, and those thoughts were far from comforting. Everywhere I turned, there was a reminder of what I'd lost, what I'd given up on, and what she'd thrown away so carelessly. Friends reached out, some of them noticing that I'd gone quiet. They'd ask if I was okay, if I needed anything, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. The thought of saying it out loud, of admitting that the woman I'd built a life with had betrayed me, felt like another punch to the chest. I didn't want pity. I didn't want people looking at me like I was broken. So I kept it to myself, shouldered the weight alone, and tried to make sense of what had happened in my own time. And yet, I kept coming back to the same question. Why didn't I see it sooner? It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that I'd missed all the signs, that I'd been so wrapped up in my own trust, in the belief that she'd never hurt me, that I'd let her get away with it. I started replaying moments in my mind, going back over every small lie, every excuse, trying to figure out when things had started falling apart. I remember one night, I was going through some old photos. We'd taken a trip a few years back, one of those vacations that seemed so perfect at the time. Looking at those pictures now, it felt like a different world. I saw us laughing, holding hands, looking at each other with what I thought was love. And I couldn't help but wonder if she'd been faking it all along, if I'd just been another part of the life she was building for appearance's sake. The thought of it tore at me, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel the sadness, let myself sit with the pain that I'd been pushing down. But as the days went by, that sadness started to shift. I'd see those same photos, remember those same moments, and realize something important. I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't betrayed her, lied to her, or taken her for granted. I'd been the one to give everything, to believe in us, to fight for the life we'd built. And that realization, as painful as it was, brought me some comfort. She hadn't hurt me because I was weak. She'd hurt me because she was selfish, because she didn't understand the value of what we had. And slowly, that understanding became a source of strength. I wasn't the one who needed to change. I wasn't the one who had failed. She was the one who had lost something real, something true. And as much as it hurt, I knew I deserved better. I started small, taking back pieces of my life one step at a time. I moved things around the house, rearranged the furniture, got rid of things that reminded me of her. I took down photos, packed away old memories, and let myself create a space that felt like mine. It was hard at first, seeing those empty spots, feeling the weight of the memories I was putting away, but with each step, I felt a little bit lighter, a little more like myself. I also started reconnecting with friends, going out, spending time with people who cared about me. For so long, my life had revolved around her, around making our relationship work. Now, I was learning to live for myself again, to find joy in my own company, in the things I loved but had put aside. It was a strange, almost unfamiliar feeling, but it was liberating. People would ask me if I hated her, if I wanted revenge, if I'd ever forgive her. But the truth was, I didn't feel any of those things. I didn't hate her, didn't want to get even. I didn't even want her to feel the pain she'd caused me. I felt nothing. She was just a part of my past now, a chapter I was closing. And that emptiness, that lack of feeling, it was freeing. For the first time, I was truly letting go. There were moments, though, when the hurt would sneak back in, like a shadow I couldn't fully shake. I'd see couples on the street, hear a song we used to love, and the pain would resurface, raw and fresh. But I didn't push it away. I let myself feel it, let it pass, and then kept moving forward. Because I knew that every step I took away from her was a step closer to the life I deserved. In time, I stopped looking back, stopped wondering if things could have been different, stopped hoping for explanations I'd never get. I focused on what I wanted, on what I'd learned. I'd learned that trust, loyalty, and honesty weren't weaknesses, they were strengths. I'd learned that giving someone your heart wasn't a mistake, even if they broke it. Because in the end, that trust, that loyalty, those were pieces of me. And I wasn't going to let her actions change who I was. I promised myself that I'd never settle again, never let someone into my life who couldn't respect what I had to offer. I'd built myself back from the ground up, piece by painful piece, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away. I knew now, with a certainty I hadn't had before, that I deserved someone who saw me, who valued me, who would never take my love for granted. So now, when I look back, I don't feel bitterness. I feel grateful. Grateful that her betrayal showed me who I was, what I was worth. She may have broken my heart, but she couldn't break me. I was stronger now, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. With each day that passed, the heaviness started to lift. I found myself waking up with a little less pain, a little more clarity. The bitterness I'd carried, that anger and betrayal, it was still there, but it didn't control me anymore. I was beginning to understand that this chapter of my life, as hard as it was, didn't have to define my future. I started looking at my life through a different lens. Instead of seeing it as something I'd lost, I started seeing it as a chance to rebuild, to create something that was entirely mine. It was strange, almost like I was getting to know myself all over again. The person I was before, the one who'd let everything revolve around her, was gone. I was someone new now, someone stronger, more aware, and more careful with my heart. One day, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, really looking at myself. It had been a while since I'd done that. Looked at myself without the weight of her betrayal hanging over me. I saw someone who had been through hell and made it out the other side. Someone who'd been broken but wasn't shattered. And for the first time, I felt a sense of pride. I'd taken the pain, the betrayal, and turned it into something that strengthened me. I had survived something that could have crushed me. But here I was, still standing, still moving forward. It was around then that I started letting go of the last pieces of her. I cleared out the final reminders of our time together, getting rid of anything that still held even a trace of the life we'd once shared. It felt like a cleansing, a way of clearing space for the new life I was building. I didn't need her shadows hanging over me anymore. I didn't need the past to keep me tied down. People started noticing the change. Friends who'd seen me struggle through those first weeks, who'd watched me silently carry the weight of her betrayal, started to see a different side of me. They'd say things like, "You look lighter," or "It's good to see you smiling again." And I knew they were right. I was lighter in more ways than one. I'd let go of something heavy, something that had been weighing me down, and in its place was a new kind of freedom. As time went on, I stopped thinking about her altogether. There was a time when every moment, every thought was wrapped up in her memory, in the hurt she'd caused. But now I didn't care. She was just someone I used to know, someone who'd been a part of my story but didn't get to write the ending. That power belonged to me. I started setting new goals, making plans that had nothing to do with anyone but myself. Things I'd always wanted to do but had put aside because I thought my life was tied to hers. I realized I didn't need to hold back anymore. This was my time, my chance to build a future that was entirely my own. I'd wasted enough time on someone who didn't value me, and now I was choosing to put that time into myself. One of the things I'd always wanted was to travel, to see places that were far away from everything I'd ever known. And for the first time, I didn't feel held back. I booked a trip on a whim, packed my bags, and set out, ready to experience the world through a new lens. Being somewhere new, away from the reminders of my old life, felt like a breath of fresh air. I was free to explore, to meet new people, to find joy in the simple things. And each day, I felt myself becoming more and more like the person I was always meant to be. Through all of this, I learned something important. I didn't need anyone else to complete me. I didn't need someone to validate my worth or make me feel valued. Everything I needed was already within me. The love, the respect, the commitment, I was capable of giving those things to myself. And that realization was worth more than anything she had ever taken from me. The journey wasn't easy. There were still days when the hurt would sneak back in, when I'd catch myself thinking about the past, wondering what might have been. But those moments grew fewer and farther between. They were just memories now. Things I'd lived through, learned from, and moved past. And as I looked forward, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope for a future that was mine to shape. Hope for a life that was filled with peace and purpose. I didn't know exactly what that future looked like, but I knew one thing: it was mine. And I was ready to embrace it, to let go of everything that had held me back, and to step forward into the life I deserved. She was just a chapter, a part of the story I'd lived, but she didn't get to define who I was. I was stronger now, wiser, and more aware of my own worth. And as I walked away from the shadows of our past, I knew that I was stepping into something brighter, something truer than anything I'd ever known. For the first time in a long time, I was free. Free to be myself, free to love and trust again. This time, with someone who truly valued me. And until then, I had myself. And that was more than enough. If you've been here with me through this journey, thank you for listening. Life throws all kinds of things at us, and sometimes it takes the hardest moments to show us who we really are. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories of growth, strength, and lessons learned, then hit subscribe.